Nigeria is already preparing for the 2023 presidential elections, and political parties have picked their flag bearers, and eyes are fixed on who their running mates will be. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has fixed June 17 as the deadline for submission of presidential candidates and running mates for all political parties. So far, speculations are rife as to who each of the major candidates will pick as running mates to boost their chances in the coming elections. Joining us to unpack this is Chuwuma Okenwa. He's a public affairs analyst and executive director of Lead Network in Austria. And Chuwuma, good to see you and thanks for your time. Now, it's just a few days before the deadline by the electoral umpire in Nigeria for submitting presidential candidates and running mates for political parties ahead of the coming elections. Now, what factors do you see playing out in this election?
Okay, as long as the choice of who deputizes the leading candidates is concerned, it's really a tough one, and as much as tough as just like picking the presidential candidate, because you are talking about partnership. You're talking about choosing someone who will have the acceptance, the clout, and at the same time, we fill up the principle of having both the South and the North in the race. Of course, it is very clear that for a Tinubu, uncompromisingly, a Northern deputy is expected. And for his counterpart, Atiku, we expect him to pick from the South. That cannot be compromised. And of course, the leading third force, which is P2B, is expected to pick from the North. So that cannot be compromised. Another factor which cannot be compromised, you talk about the capacity of the candidate, the political sagacity, how acceptable the person is in his region and beyond. You talk about whether the person also have like the war chest in terms of the financial wherewithal to be able to like, help the leading candidates who obviously have financial muscles. And then another thing that is now playing out, and which is a very dicey one, is in terms of religion. And for the very first time, we are seeing like some contemplation, especially as it has to do with Tinubu, a likelihood of picking. If I am to predict the person he may likely, maybe you quote me after now and just mark it, but the person I feel is going to pick in the North is Nasser El-Rufai, right? And the challenge there that is before the two major candidates from the major political parties is this. In the case of a Tinubu, picking maybe like a Northern Christian, how viable is a Northern Christian in the North? What are the chances of the person able to like get like votes? And then on the part of Tinubu now, being a Muslim, and being the fact that the southern part of Nigeria is largely dominated by Christian, and also picking a fellow Muslim from the North, how viable is his vote going to be if the religious sentiment is actually to play out? So these are the emerging challenges. But if you ask me, most likely, and from all the pressures from the APC governors, Tinubu is likely to pick a Muslim candidate.
And, looking at the permutations, the emergence of the APC and PDP candidates, both Muslims, had stopped what you have highlighted now about the desirability of Muslims equally emerging as their running mates. Now, is Nigeria ready for this?
Honestly, at the moment, Nigeria is not ready for that because these are our realities. Of course, if we are to make reference to some developed societies where neither of these major dynamics we consider in Nigerian situation, where neither of those things count but except competence, you will discover they have actually moved on, because you can visibly see, both in the appointment, both in the body language, both in the gestures of the leaders, it doesn't in any way favor any appointment based on these lines of zone, of religion, But we've seen, like, for instance, in the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration, apart from like his administration being northern dominated, you're also talking about being Muslim northern dominated. That's northern Muslim dominated. So these are like pointers. So until the leaders grow to that point where we can run an all-inclusive Nigeria, then trying to advocate what is working in other nations for our own reality becomes a different case, because in its very essence, these are two different societies.
Let me quickly bring in this before I let you go. And the talk amongst analysts, political analysts like yourself in Nigeria, is that Nigeria may be going into a runoff election next year, going by two major contestants. Talking about the Labour Party candidate, Peter Obi, and the New Nigeria People's Party, Musa Rabiu Kwankwaso.
Well, I don't think there's going to be like any need for like a runoff. Honestly, like there's really a lot of things that is really going to happen that may shock lots of Nigerians. You see, like the conversation is already being framed, and for those who have already like written off like P2B, based on the realities of Nigeria and maybe other nations where you only have the conversations around two major political parties. The very interesting thing about this election cycle is that the campaigns are going to start earlier, the processes are going to start earlier. At least by the Friday this month, by this week, we must have known who are the vice presidential candidates. It was not like that in the last election cycle. And the interesting thing is that the same set of people that represent the breed of Muhammadu Buhari, talking about the likes of Atiku, talking about the likes of Tinubu, are still the one that will now square it out with a candidate who is touted as being spotless, and that's talking about Peter Obi. As for like maybe like the NMPP candidate, would have expected him to build like a synergy, since he was the first to start advocating for a third force. That third force would have been possible if he was able to fraternize with Peter Obi. Unfortunately, he's not. But interestingly, he is not mustering the level of clout that Peter Obi is doing. And if the NSAS generation actually buy entirely in the vision, and like we are seeing like unusual response in terms of voter registration, advocating for extension in the date, if it continues really that way, they are probably going to be like a revolution like we've never seen in terms of election and politics.
Well, Chuwuma, Okenwa, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.